Oh, hello, good night.
Hi.
I'm a fan from Brazil. It's a great pleasure to see you both in person.
Thank you.
My question is in regard to Jordan Peterson, especially because he's been so prominent in the media on YouTube. His book is one of the best sellers worldwide. He's giving a lot of talks. And although I admire Mr. Peterson's views in many issues, when it comes to religion, it's quite disturbing for me, for being an atheist and everything. And I would like to hear both of you opinion on the question, since Jordan Peterson is so influential, because he believes in God and he has these religious beliefs, is this a threat to the skeptical movement way of thinking?
Is it a threat to the skeptical movement? No, I think, well, all right, this is going to be glib and rude, but at least it's honest. I don't think it's skeptics that are actually agreeing with Jordan, or at least not people who are applying skepticism. The thing is, skepticism is essentially, as the last gentleman said, withholding your assent to an idea. It is, I am not convinced and will not be convinced until there's sufficient evidence to warrant that. That's it. It's not saying this is nonsense. I don't run around, in many cases, there's a line that Richard used that's from somebody else, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was something about your idea isn't even wrong. That it's so muddled and confused that it isn't even wrong. Essentially, it's incoherent and unfalsifiable. I don't know how big of a threat this is. What I've been trying to do, I did the event, and I know Douglas is going to do some events. Sam's done. I think Sam's got like 3 or 4 events with him. And hopefully over the course of those, we can get to some clarity about, sometimes I'm not convinced I even remotely understand what he's advocating for, because I'll be honest, I don't care about metaphorical truths at all. I care about reality. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm fine with the idea that you can inspire people through this stuff. But I can't tell you how much of a danger it is to anything, because there are fans who've written me who say, oh, I'm a big fan of yours and I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson's. I couldn't wait for you guys to sit down and talk. And I wasn't familiar with Jordan, so I kept saying, what is it about him or his ideas that you are a fan of? And most of them didn't answer. There were a couple that answered with something that I still didn't grasp, and one of them was pretty much, I just like the way he talks about stuff, and he's really good on psychology. And I'm not here to psychoanalyze him or get in his head, but based on what he said, I don't know how much danger there is. It may be that this is a softening of religion. It may be a completely different type of reform. I just wish that I have a difficult time looking at someone who's an apologist about something that's unclear. Because if a word can mean anything to anybody, then it means nothing. And so if you say, I believe in God, and you and everybody else have a completely different, God is real, and you have different definitions of God and is and real, I don't know where you go from there.
Yeah, I agree with some of that.
Then you're partially right.
And I'm partially right. I think that he's done several things, and he's doing several things which are very important. I don't know if one's allowed to still quote Woody Allen, but let me just try. Some years ago, Woody Allen gave an interview in which he was asked about whether he minded not having gone to university, and he said he had, because although he'd spent his life reading, and amazingly wide reader and a wide knowledge, he said he felt that it was like a bridge. He had that bit and he had that bit, but what he hadn't ever got was that. And I knew exactly what he meant. Like I don't have the arc that you can get if you studied the whole of, I don't know, whether it's literature or law or whatever. You know how you get to there because you came from here and you know the whole route over the bridge. My view is that a lot of young people, which is who Jordan's mainly speaking to, I think, are people who just, they don't know, like, what is this tradition or this civilization or this culture or this art or this philosophy or any of it. They've been, maybe it's worse if they've been to university these days, but everything's been deconstructed. They're told there is no core idea, no core curriculum, all this sort of thing. Everything's going to be taken in its own context. And the world is befuddling to them because it's been presented as more befuddling even than it is. And he's trying to give these people, and I think pretty successfully is, an idea of what that whole bridge might be. And the second thing I'll just say very quickly is that he is speaking to a thing which I've written about quite a lot as well, which is this sense, again, I don't want to bang on about the Europe aspect of this, but a German philosopher, Jürgen Habermas, who I quote in my book, wrote what for me was a very important essay some years ago called The Awareness of What's Missing, where he writes about a friend's funeral who is an atheist who leaves instruction that there is to be a funeral in a church. There's no amen to be said, and there are to be no priests in robes. And Habermas, in basically his most coherent work, in my view, sums this up as the fact that he says his friend has recognized the loss of faith and has also recognized that we have not yet come up with anything that remotely goes into its place. Now, lots of atheists say we don't want to fill that place. We don't want to come up with new religions or replacements for religion and so on. Fine, but that there is a vacuum there, I think, has to be recognized. And my own view is that there is a deep, deep longing that people will have with or without religious answers. And that to pretend that that is not there is a very big mistake, whether you're a believer or a non-believer. And he appears to be speaking to those deeps. And I, at any rate, think that that is a great service. I have disagreements with some of the ways in which he answers that. But this, a final thought, I mean, this is, all the time, there's an interpretation of what's happened with atheism over the last couple of decades, which is that, broadly speaking, in the 2000s, people were so worried about, among other things, post 9/11 and so on and so forth, that it had a great run at running straight at the thing. Did a terrific job, Hitch and others, amazing thing, but that we are in something that is following that success at the moment, by which I mean that running at the target worked to some considerable degree. But there are a set of questions now which we have to be engaged in, which are slightly further down the road. And I think he's involved in that territory as much as or more than anyone. And I'd see no other plausible people at the moment.
I think I agree with you that he's filling a gap that some people experience. I just don't agree that there's necessarily a gap, because I'm happy with taking the good wherever I find it, including within religious doctrines, and getting rid of the bad. And so the concerns that people have about the vacuum portion, everyone that I've been presented with, I have, at least for me, and it may not apply for everybody else, I don't see a vacuum there.
Right.
I have a perfectly acceptable moral foundation absent religion. I think that, and a matter of fact, not only do I think that the vacuum is something that religions have created, but amplified. They've done a disservice to people in how they deal with death by not acknowledging that it's an inevitable part of life. That if you realize or are convinced that this is the only life you know you're going to get, you might treat people differently the first time around rather than thinking you could make up for it. It was said once that religions poison you and then offer you the cure. And I think that it's more accurate to say, and I've said this before, that religions convince you that you're poisoned and then offer you the homeopathic remedy. And it turns out that there was no poison, that you weren't a bad fallen creature, that you aren't that are your fears about death or loneliness or whatever, these are just the facts of the universe. The universe doesn't care about us, so we have to care about us.